Hey, what's up folks? How's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. And today we're going to be doing an ultimate tablet comparison between two of the world's most powerful tablets. It's available right now. I'm talking about the new 2018 iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch version, versus the Microsoft Surface Pro 6. Both PCs have pretty powerful internal capabilities. They're ultra portable and they have amazing displays, not to mention pretty decent battery performance. We're going to be talking about all those factors and more to hopefully determine which one is the more capable device and to hopefully determine which one is best for you. So let's get right into it. Now, what we're going to be comparing is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro compared to the Surface Pro 6, which has a 12.3-inch display. The aspect ratio, as you can see, is a little bit different on both. We have a 4:3 aspect ratio on the iPad and a 3:2 aspect ratio on the Surface. Now, in terms of the pixel count, you'll see that the iPad Pro technically has more pixels, 2732 by 2048, compared to the SP's 2736 by 1824. But since the Surface has a slightly smaller display, it technically has a higher pixel density of 267 by 264. Now, in real life, this is obviously a marginal difference to say none the least. To my eyes, I think the iPad Pro's display is absolutely stunning, super contrasty, very, very bright, certainly brighter than the Surface. I can certainly question the level of color accuracy that we're getting out of the iPad Pro, but in terms of sheer show-stopping performance, I'm really impressed with it. It's one of the best displays I've ever encountered in any consumer electronic device. Now, not only do you have awesome multi-touch capabilities on both platforms, but this time around, they're very similar in terms of their stylus architecture. For years, the Surface Pen has been a magnetic latching device that would integrate directly onto the Surface tablet really, really easily. And even though Apple may or may not have ripped off the Microsoft design, they've definitely improved the Pencil with the magnetic latching capabilities, and the fact that it can instantly charge and connect to your iPad is a huge improvement from the previous generation where you had to pair and charge the Pencil via the old Lightning connection. Now, comparatively, the Surface Pen has no real drawbacks that I can think of in terms of connectivity. You do have to replace the Quad A battery every 12 months, but that doesn't seem to be a huge nuisance for most people. Now, since both these tablets are kind of geared towards a laptop replacement solution, we definitely have to talk about the native keyboard attachments. Now, on the iPad Pro, we have a new Folio Smart Keyboard. It attaches magnetically, but one of the major benefits compared to the previous generation iPad keyboard is now we have two viewing angle options, which is good, but not better than the Surface Pro keyboard that has infinite viewing options thanks to the built-in kickstand that we have on the tablet itself. Now, when it comes to protection, we definitely have to give it to the iPad keyboard case since it's covering both the front and back of the device, versus the Surface keyboard more or less protects the front of the device. But of course, when it comes to capabilities, there's really no contest. The Surface Pro keyboard is LED backlit, has a large overall key spacing, so it's very easy and comfortable to type with, especially for long periods of time. And we have a multi-touch trackpad, which does make sense considering this is going to replace a real laptop, something that you're going to actually do actual work on. Now, moving on, when you first use the iPad Pro, one of the things that was really shocking to me is how thin and light it was compared to the Surface Pro 6. In terms of actual dimensions, you can see that we have 8.5 millimeter thickness on the Surface Pro 6 versus even the 12.9-inch version of the iPad Pro is only 5.9 millimeters in terms of thickness and only weighs about 631 grams for the Wi-Fi version. Furthermore, in terms of ports, for the first time ever on any iOS device, we have a USB-C connection on the new iPad Pro, which is nice to see. But in terms of the level of connectivity options, certainly the Surface Pro 6 is the winner. We have a full-size USB 3.0 port, a mini DisplayPort connections for outputting video, and even a micro SD expansion slot for upgrading the internal memory, which is a handy feature. Now, comparing the audio features, we do have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the Surface, whereas that's missing on the iPad. But in terms of the speakers, I definitely think the iPad has the Surface beat on this one because it has quad channel speakers, sound very full. The bass response is actually quite surprisingly deep, and even though we have dual channel Dolby spec speakers, they simply don't compete with what's being offered with the iPad, another highlight is with the microphones. We have up to 5 microphones on the iPad Pro versus 2 mics on the Surface Pro. And of course, when it comes to the camera capabilities, the iPad is definitely dominant over here. We have a 12 megapixel rearward facing camera module, which is very similar to what we would find on the current gen iPhones, and a 7 megapixel front camera versus you're looking at 8 and 5 megapixel cameras for the rear and front, respectively, on the Surface Pro 6. Now, moving forward, the new iPad Pro has the most powerful processor ever put on an iOS device, and that's the new A12X octa-core CPU. It also has a built-in 7-core GPU, and you can get storage configuration ranging from 64 gigabytes all the way up to 1 terabyte. On the Surface Pro, we're looking at a Core i5 with integrated 620 graphics. This is a dual-core chip with 4 threads, and you can update that to a Core i7 8650U processor that is 4 cores with 8 threads, and you can get 8 to 16 gigabyte RAM options, and you can obviously upgrade the internal storage from 128 gigabytes all the way up to 1 terabyte, just like the iPad. Now, we obviously can't do a direct apples to apples performance test, but just to give you guys a little idea of what this new processor can do from Apple, here's our Geekbench results on both the i5 and i7 Surface Pros, and you could see in terms of single core performance is pretty much on par with the i7 on the Surface Pro 6, but in terms of multi-core performance was way beyond both of them. So just to give you an idea of how fast this A12X is compared to just the standard A12 that's in the new XS and XR iPhones, you're looking at the Antutu benchmarks over here, and we're getting over 550,000 points versus 350,000 points on the current generation iPhone. So this thing is a real monster, and it's up there with one of the most fastest mobile CPUs and GPU configurations in the world right now. Now, lastly, let's talk about the battery on both these two. In terms of actual capacity and size, the Surface Pro 6 has a 45 watt-hour battery, which is certainly larger than the 36.7 watt-hour battery on the iPad, but keep in mind that the iPad is much lighter and thinner, which is the result of that battery size. But even with that said, it's still doing an amazing job in terms of delivering pretty decent battery performance. Based on our video playback test, we got 12 hours, 51 minute runtime on the iPad versus 13 hours, 21 minutes on the Surface Pro 6. Now, to sum up everything we've talked about, let's just go over some of the strengths that each platform has to deliver. Let's start with the new 2018 iPad. Now, firstly, if I had to pick something about it, I would definitely say that the display is its best attribute. It's really stunning to see in person. It's definitely a lot brighter and more vibrant than the Surface, even though they're pretty much on par with each other in terms of clarity and sharpness. Furthermore, I'm really liking the new Apple Pencil. I like the fact that it can magnetically charge itself with that built-in battery, something that's missing from the Surface Pen. Additionally, I think for creative applications, drawing, photo editing, things like that, it really suits the iPad platform quite well, and it feels very, very natural to use, and it has a nice texture when pressed up against the screen. The other thing that's cool is that double tap feature, which you can tap anywhere along the pencil and it'll switch different commands for you, so that's definitely nicely integrated. Now, even though it's very difficult to compare the internal architecture between the Apple A12X and the Intel Core i5, Core i7 processors in the Surface Pro, I think it's safe to say, based on some of the parameters and some of our testing, that the A12X is faster than any of the iterations of the new Surface Pro. It's a super fast processor that Apple has delivered over here, and it's faster than even the current generation MacBook Air, which is very, very impressive to see. Beyond that, as we discussed before, the camera capabilities on the iPad Pro is way beyond what we have on the Surface. It's a lot more capable camera, both in terms of stills and video. And regarding audio, even though we don't have a headphone jack, I do like the sound coming out of the quad channel speakers, and the audio quality of the microphones is better as well. Now, one of the huge benefits of the Surface Pro 6 is the fact that it's running a full Windows 10 operating system. One of the biggest limitations of the iPad Pro is iOS. Even though they've made it more capable over the years, it's still fairly limited in terms of what you can do compared to a real MacBook PC or a desktop platform. And of course, Windows is the most capable operating system in the entire world, and you pretty much have that right in your fingertips with the Surface Pro 6. Moreover, the Surface keyboard cover is a lot more capable than what we have natively with Apple. So we have a trackpad to begin with, and we have a full-size keyboard that has LED backlit, and it feels a lot more comfortable, especially for prolonged typing sessions. Additionally, one strength of the Surface Pen compared to the Apple Pencil is the fact that the point is a lot more finer, so you can get a little bit more precise in your actions, which definitely makes sense for using a full Windows-based operating system where that precision is really needed. It's designed for a mouse and a keyboard to begin with. And with the Pixel Sense display, you can use other screen implements like the Surface Dial to get even more interactivity and control with the display itself. Beyond that, we have a lot more ports and connectivity options on the Surface, unlike the iPad, which just uses USB-C, which granted you can use for a lot of other things, but it's always nice to have things like a full-size USB connection, a real headphone jack, as well as a micro SD expansion slot to upgrade the internal memory. Moreover, in terms of the battery specifications, we do have a larger capacity battery, and based on our testing, you can theoretically definitely get a little bit longer battery life than the iPad Pro, but not by a significant margin, but a margin nonetheless. And last but not leastly is of course that infinitely adjustable kickstand, which so many people have grown to love, and the fact that it's built into the Surface means that you don't necessarily need a case or anything like that to use it upright on a tabletop or desktop surface. And when it comes to the price point, the Surface Pro 6 starts around $899 for the base configuration, and the 12.9-inch version of the iPad Pro is just under $1,000. If you want to get the 11-inch, though, it is $799, which has the same capability, just smaller display. And that could be a great tool, but it's always nice to have that larger display. So the iPad, as it stands right now, from the baseline configuration, is a little bit more expensive than the Surface, which could be another deciding factor for some of you guys out there. But really, on that, guys, that's really it. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Check out our comparison between the new MacBook Air versus the Surface Laptop 2, just a different counterpart comparison just on the laptop side of things. So definitely check out that video if you haven't already. Other than that, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Take care.